Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good to see you all tonight. Let's just open up our service in the word of prayer. Brother Jamie, you can nice and local speak.
Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this time that we have, Lord, just to gather together. Lord, we praise you and we thank you for who you are. Lord, we pray that you would, Lord, speak to us through your word. And Lord, help us to, as we go through the book of Genesis, Lord, just to see your amazing handiwork, Lord, through creation and, Lord, through how you just spoke and things existed. Lord, we know that you're an amazing God and we know that you're a powerful God, Lord. You overcome every battle. Lord, we just praise you and pray that you would be with us today. In your name we pray. Amen.
I'll just give you some announcements. Don't forget Thursday night is ladies' prayer night, 6 o'clock. If you can get in touch with my wife, Lorraine, for that. Will that be effective?
No, there's only about 4 seconds.
Okay. Friday night is prayer night for the men. If you on WhatsApp chat, I think you'll send the link on there.
Yeah, it's the same link.
Yeah, and if you want, you just want to get in touch with Jamie, Jamie will look you up and sort you out. Don't forget to be in your places Sunday at 10:30. Don't forget you're going to book your slots online. As of yet, the guidelines given, we're still allowed to meet. We'll let everyone know any difference as we did before if anything comes up over the weekend. And Sunday PM as well, 6 o'clock, you just have to use the sign-up sheet. Upcoming events, Sunday the 20th, we have a teen Sunday school starting again. So after the church service, if the teens just stay behind, and Pastor Nelson is going to be organising that, that's at 12 o'clock. That will start on the 20th on Sunday. Also, I nearly forgot, don't forget Janet Nelson as well, she does prayer night on a Friday. So if you want to get in touch with her, she does it by Zoom as well. So anybody that's at home, or anybody who just can't get to the ladies' prayer night or just wants to do it from the house, just get in touch with Janet and she'll organise a time of prayer with you guys, so no one gets left out, everyone gets the opportunity of being involved. And let's not forget tomorrow, and I'm sure Karen's really excited about it, the 10th of September, she's waited a long time for it. We have our Mums and Tots, which starts at 9:30 in the morning. So just keep praying that it's going to be a success. I'm looking forward to it, I'm excited about it. It's good to see new ministry start in the church. And like I say, we've had one before and we've had success from it. We've got ladies in the church that have come through that as well, come to know the Lord. And just an opportunity as well, just to get out in the community and get them come in, see what we're all about, see the faces to the building. We've got all that scary. And that's all of our notices, I don't think there's anything. Just pray for Keith. He's going to be flying out on Friday morning to put his father to rest. And just pray that everything works well for him. It's going to be a bit difficult for him, like we said. It's the last of his family in the States. He's an intermediate family at least. So really, we are all he has now, So make sure you let him know that you're thinking about him and praying during this time. Open your Bibles then, if you would please, to the book of Genesis. We're still in chapter 1. Just a quick recap. Chapter 1, we did chapter 1 verses 1 and 2. And then last week we did verses 3 through to 5. Just some things that we looked at there. First of all, in verse 3, remember the passage starts out and God said, and we see there that God spoke the universe into existence. The technical term is ex nihilo, the Latin term which means out of nothing. God created everything out of nothing. And even in our modern day today, astrophysicists are telling us that that's how the universe began. They don't know who was behind it. I always remember a friend of mine at work, and he was making fun of me, saying, you believe in magic? Because obviously you believe that God created everything and created animals, and he says that's magic. And I said, but you believe everything come from nothing? Absolutely nothing. And the difference is, I've got a magician who can bring everything into existence. Nothing does nothing. That's what we saw last week. That is, and it really is the most popular view among scientists today, that the universe came into existence through absolutely nothing. Okay. If you go on YouTube, there's a funny video of Richard Dawkins. He's on some panel. Have you seen this? And there's some priest there, and there's all this audience. And he was saying that it is absolutely nothing that brought this world into existence. And everyone just burst into laughter. And he got really angry with the audience. Says, "Why are you laughing? What is funny?" And the priest says to him that you're trying to say that everything came into existence from nothing is ridiculous. And this is, one of the leading atheists in the world, Richard Dawkins. So he says, and God said, and then the second part of verse 3, let there be light, and there was light. This was not the sun, the moon, or the stars. Remember, that comes on the fourth day. And again, that's something else that people will critique about the Bible. They'll say, well, what is this light? And anyone remember what this light is? It's the Shekinah glory of God. Remember 2 Corinthians 4:6. For God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, had shined in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. It's the glory of God. And so what we looked at last week is that the earth, a sphere now, it's starting to revolve, and the light is one directional, and we know that because of the next statement. It says, and God saw that the light was good, and divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and darkness called night. So even though the sun's not there, the light that's coming is from God's throne. It's one directional, and we still have a night and day. You know how the earth works, don't you? When you revolve. It's dark on the other side at the moment. So there we see the first day and the first night. And then we ended in verse 5, the last part. It says it was evening, then it was morning, and so we're the first day. And so we see the first day, and literally the first day of all creation. And I want to talk a little bit today about the days in the Bible. We won't go any further in the text. I want to talk about how old the earth is, the age of the earth. And I think it's really important because it's an area where the Christian faith has been attacked, because modern theories tell us that the earth is billions of years old, the universe is even older. Yet the Bible teaches us that the earth, or at least the way that we see it now, is young. We're going to see very, very young. So today I want to talk to you about the age of the earth. The age of the earth and the length of the days mentioned in Genesis have involved a major controversy over the last 150 years. You know, like it says, in the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, sixth day, and on the seventh day he rested. Well, because of new theories that have come out in the last 150 years, some Christians have adopted those theories. Now, to begin with, I think some Christians adopted them not really understanding or knowing what the true consequences of that would be. You know, once you start accepting that the universe is billions of years old, millions of years, or you're starting to accept modern day theories of where we come from. And that brings in even more problems then, because it does away with the concept of the idea of God, and it does away with the concept and the idea of morality. And so we're just animals, we're just higher primates. And so we can make up the rules as we go along. I mean, we're looking at the moment on the news, and everyone's acting like animals around the world at the moment anyway. And the reason being is because they are creating the moral standard for the world. And yet the Bible tells us that God made us in his image and his likeness. And God has set a standard for us to live by. There's a standard that we have to live by. And it's so important to understand that, because if we start throwing those sort of things out the window, people start to question what God says in his word. You know, people are questioning nowadays what a man and a woman is. People are questioning whether a baby in the womb is really a baby. You know, it's a parasite. You know, people are saying those sort of things, you know, to try to justify some of the atrocities that we see. So it really starts with the concept of millions and billions of years. So it's believed that by naturalists, so naturalists, not naturists, okay, naturalists, that's people who don't believe in the supernatural, that the universe dates approximately 13.8 billion years, okay? Give or take, they say 100 million. You can sort of give or take 100 million, but that's what they say. The Earth is believed to be in the region of 4.54 billion years, give or take 50 million. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with. There were Christians who brought into this teaching and tried to redefine what the chronological timescale is in the Bible to suit it. So they believe these things, and then they look at the Bible and see where it talks about the first day, second day, third day, and the genealogies and so on, and they try to fit in this idea of millions and billions of years. So what are some of the evidences that they would say? Well, they'd say this: the word day in Hebrew, the word day, by the way, is yom. Yom. Don't worry too much about what's on the PowerPoint yet. We'll come to that in a moment. Yom. In the Bible does not always have to refer to a 24-hour period, they say. Okay. For example, the Bible talks about the day of the Lord. What is that, the day of the Lord? It's the tribulation. It's a name for the tribulation period. How long does the tribulation last for? 7 years. And the word day is there, isn't it? So the day of the Lord. So they'll say, so there's an example where the word day doesn't always have to mean day. It can mean a longer period of time. If someone could get Psalms 19 verse 4 for me, and someone else gets 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 8. Psalms 19 verse 4 and 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 8. Yep, do you want to read the Psalms passage? Nice and loud.
For 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night.
Okay, so in that passage, for 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night. It's saying that God, to time to God is like it's one short moment of the day and watching the night. Just literally means night time. Is like 1,000 years to him. Do you want to read the next one, please, Jamie, if you could?
But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that the one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and as 1,000 years as one day.
Yeah. 1,000 years to the Lord is one day, and one day is like 1,000 years. Does anyone really know what the Lord, or what's being said in those passages? Is it really saying that to God time is longer? So when we see the words day occurring in the Bible, we have to take that to mean any number of time. Does anyone really know what's happening in those two verses?
God exists outside of time.
Yeah. God exists outside of time, so he's observing everything. So to him a day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is a day. You know, there's no limit, because he's not bound by the law, you say, the law of time. He's not bound by it. So really these passages, they have to be taken with that in mind, that you can't just say, well, every single passage in the Bible now where we see the word day, we can't take it as literally. So what does the Bible really say? So if we go back to Genesis chapter 1 and verse 5 and look at this statement, the evening and the morning were the first day. Now that sounds to me like a 24-hour period. It makes it very clear, because it says the evening and then the morning. He's even added the two parts of time that we divide the day into. The word day, whenever used in the Bible, be it in the singular or the plural, and with a number, because it says the first day, and then it says it was the second day, evening, morning, and the third day. Okay, so whenever it occurs with a number, whether it's in the singular or plural, it occurs 410 times outside of chapter 1 of Genesis, and it always refers to a 24-hour day. Every single time. And notice I said outside of Genesis, because it's showing that it's consistent throughout the Bible. The term evening plus morning without the word day appears 38 times outside of Genesis chapter 1 and always refers to a normal day. The term night and without the word day appears 52 times outside of Genesis and always refers to a 24-hour period. You know, every single time we see it there, the Bible makes it very clear that it's a 24-hour period. You know, when we talk about the day of the Lord, we know what that is, because there's other passages that explains to us what the day of the Lord is. It's a 7-year period. In fact, it's more concentrated on the last 3.5 year period, and it says 42 months. I think it's 1,200 and something days, and I forget how many weeks, I can't remember exactly, but it gives us months, weeks and days. It tells us. So it breaks everything down for us. So how long, according to the Bible then, have we been on this earth? How long have we been on this earth? And I know everyone says 6,000 years, but how do we know that? So we're going to look at that today. We'll go through it quickly because there's other things I want to share with you. The best way to know is to start with eyewitnesses. So this is one of the problems we're going to find and we're going to discover tonight, if you don't already know, is it's okay saying that we know the age of the earth, like it's 13 billion or 4 billion, but no one was there. And because no one was there, there's no eyewitnesses. So what we're referring to there is we call it historical science. This is not observable science. There's a difference, historical and observable science. Observable science is something we can do in a lab and we can repeat it over and over again. And that's true science. Science means knowledge, doesn't it? It's the word that means knowledge. And so observable science means that we know this, we've proved it over and over again. But historical science means that you're relying on something in the past. Something you're not there. But we would argue as Christians, we know someone who was there, and that's God. And so we believe we've got it right, and we're going to look at some things tonight, and hopefully we'll come to some conclusions. So we know the first 6 days. It tells us here in Genesis 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and in fact 7 days. But Adam to the flood, we can actually work out, this comes from following all the genealogies in chapter 5. It lists all the people that were born, when they were born, when they died, and when they started to produce children, and real detailed descriptions given in Genesis chapter 5 so that we can follow. And so we know that from Adam to the flood, let me just write this down for you. From Adam to the flood. Now, when we get further into Genesis, we're going to see some charts. I'm going to show you some charts. And what's really interesting is when you look at who was alive at certain periods of time. It's like this. Did you know that Shem, the son of Noah, was alive when Abraham was? Yeah. So when we talk about the story of the flood, there was someone alive in the day of Abraham's day that knew about the flood, that experienced the flood. It's really interesting when you start to compare all these dates. From Adam to the flood is 1656. 1,656 years. Okay, so Adam, and then all the way to the flood. Next, from the flood to Abraham. Abraham is, if we go Abraham, sorry, back to front, isn't it? The flood to Abraham. From the flood to Abraham is a total of 352 years. Like I say, Shem was still alive then. So this means this would be the year from creation. And they use this term, AH. You know what that means? AH. Anno Domini, in the year of Adam. Okay, you know we use AD and BC. AD stands for Anno Domini, which is in the year of the Lord. So Abraham was born in the year 2008 from Adam. Okay. Now we know Abraham to Isaac was 100 years. Isaac to Jacob was 60 years. But then the next big date is when Jacob entered Egypt. That's 130 years. So Israel's sojourning to Egypt. So if we go say Israel to Egypt. To Egypt. Okay. Israel to Egypt. Where was it? Is 130 years on top of that. So in total now, we're in the year 2000. When we had all the lives of thing in 2,728. And then the Exodus occurs. So we have the Exodus. You remember they were there for so many years. How many years were they there for?
400.
400. To be exact, 430 years. 430 years. 2728. I'll just put the wrong date there. 2298, sorry. 2298, 22. I shouldn't have done this maths. 2798, that's all right. That's still not right, is it? 2728. You shout the numbers out, don't you? He's only got the notes, that's all. He's not working any faster than me. And then from the Exodus to Solomon's temple. So we have the Exodus to the temple being built.
480.
And what's that, sorry?
480.
480 years, thank you, Jamie. And that puts us in the year what?
3,208.
3,208. Okay. And then from the temple so it's the start of the temple to the division under Rehoboam. Remember Solomon had a son Rehoboam, and then the kingdom divided. Okay. So the division of the kingdom. When did that happen, Jamie?
37 years after, so...
Yeah, 37 years after the temple.
3,245.
3,245. And the next one, then from the split of Israel to the exile. Do you remember they went into Babylon? Okay. How many years was that?
70.
345 years.
Exile. Exile, that's one way around. 345 years. Now you've got to, some parts of the Bible tells us that it was longer, but you've got to remember some kings overlapped each other. So the exile from creation was 3,590 years. Now all these dates are mentioned in the Bible. It doesn't say this specific, but it tells us, like for example the one we just looked at, we know the date, what was the date of the exile? Does anyone know the date of the exile from Bible College? 588 BC. I know that, not just because I'm out. This means that the exile to Christ was 588 years. So they come back. So the exile happens to Jesus is 588 BC. Okay? And so what does that total then, Jamie?
4,178.
70. 4,178 years. So from creation, remember now we're dealing with today. So we've gone all the way to Christ. So Jesus existed 4,178 years from creation. Okay? 4,178 years from creation. So we live in the year what? 2020. Okay? So we live in the year 6,198 Anno Domini. Okay? So that's how old the world is. The earth, the population of the earth, the creation itself that we see in Genesis is 6,198 years, give or take 50 years. Not 50 million. Okay? Yeah. So, why do they come up with dates that completely contradict this? I mean, they're on the next level, aren't they? The dates that they're giving. You know, you had several zeros on top of what we're believing. And have you ever tried witnessing someone who believes that? And they know of this date? They mock us. People make fun of what we believe. They mock the fact that we think that the earth is this old, because they're saying obviously there's so much evidence to prove that the earth is billions and billions of years old that we really shouldn't be taking these sort of things serious. So what are the scientific ways to determine the age of the earth? What are some of the scientific ways? And we're going to look at them. But remember, like I said, the only way you know whether something really begun, you have to be there at the start. Otherwise, you're using historical science and non-observable. So what are some of the methods that they use to date the Earth? The first one, or the most common one, is what we call radiometric dating. And I don't want you to be scared of this stuff. I can remember looking into this years ago, and I was thinking, man, I don't know all this stuff. And I still don't know some of it now. Some of this information is, some of the names that they use, I still find it very difficult. But once you get the idea of how they do it, you'll understand it's very simple to refute. Okay, so if you look here, see you've got like parent isotopes there. These are just elements, okay, that you find in rocks. We have uranium-238, uranium-234, thorium-232, and so on and so on. But these elements are unstable. in the rocks. They find them in rocks, but they're unstable, and so what happens is they start to decay. But when they start to decay, they turn into other elements. So those parent isotopes are usually called the mother elements, okay? And then the ones that's next to it, so uranium-238, and then you have lead-206. That's what uranium-238 will break down to over time. It will turn into lead-206. And they refer to that as the daughter element, so it's breaking down slowly. I'll just show you, kind of give you a picture of what it means, like in a picture form. You imagine there's the rock, it's got uranium in it, and over time you'll start to find the daughter element in the rock over time. Okay. But notice the dates on the side. So from uranium-238 to lead-206, they say it takes 4.5 billion years for it to change. They call it an half-life. In other words, for 50% of it to change, and then after that 25%, and then 12.5, and it keeps going. It keeps saying like an half-life. And there's many different ways of testing rocks. So they might go for the 106 billion year one samarium. I can't say some of these. Adam probably say them better than me. He likes his science. But we see here, there's many different ways, and there's some more, even more than what we see here. There's other different ways of dating rocks. Okay, so unstable atoms such as uranium eventually change into stable atoms such as lead. The original version is called parent atom or isotope, and new version is called daughter atom. So it breaks down. And what they do is they measure how much of these atoms are in the rock, and they work it out from there. Okay. One of the best analogies that's usually given is the hourglass. You're familiar with this. Remember you used to get your little egg timers and turn them upside down, and the sand pours in through the other side. And this is a good analogy because over time, one thing's moving into the next thing. And you imagine that being the rock. You've got one element slowly changing into the other element over time. Okay? But there's some assumptions that you have to have for this to be true. Okay? So you imagine you find a rock. The first assumption is that the conditions that you find in it, when it first started, was set at 0. You know, you get an hourglass and you turn it upside down, it starts from the beginning. You're assuming that that's the way it was with the rock. That when you found the rock, you've got both the mother and the daughter elements inside the rock. You're assuming that originally there was just the mother element and there was no daughter element there at all. It's just like turning the hourglass over. No geologists were present when most rocks were formed, so they cannot test whether the original rocks already contained daughter isotopes alongside with their parent radioisotopes. Okay, so you just don't know whether there was 2 elements there or 1 element to begin. Why? Because you wasn't there. You're not an eyewitness. The second assumption is this, that there's been no contamination. Unlike the hourglass, where its 2 bowls are sealed, radioactive clock or in the rocks is open to contamination by gain or loss of parent or daughter isotopes. So let's say it's contaminated by other lava falling next to it and more elements fall into it. So but you're not there. You never observed that happen, so you're assuming that it happened. Let me give you an example of one. Because of such contamination, the less than 50-year-old lava flows at Mount Nuugogo in New Zealand. So there's basically a lava flow in New Zealand that we watched happen 50 years ago, okay, yielded iridium, strontium, let's go back a second, we'll go the other way, yeah. See there, iridium, strontium, or whatever it is there. It gave an age of 133 million years old, but we know how old it was 50 years old, okay. So some contamination must have happened. Something happened there, or they dated it with the other age samarium. Is it the bottom one there? They dated it with that, and it came up at 197 million. Then they dated it with the uranium and the lead, the top one, and it came up with 3.98 billion. And this is 50-year-old lava. As soon as the lava cools down and sets, you can start to do the dating process. and it should be zero. It shouldn't register at all. Okay, so there must have been contamination, or something's wrong there. There's something wrong with the dating system. The third assumption is that there's a constant decay rate. For example, the radioactive decay of uranium in tiny crystals in a New Mexico granite yields a uranium lead age of 1.5 billion years. Yet the same uranium decay also produces abundance of helium, but only 6,000 years worth. Okay, so is the decay rate exactly the same all the time? So it's like this, we watch that, we can observe it, and we can see the sand moving, we know how fast it moves. But if I leave the room, let's say Karen's cooking some eggs, and she's done her eggs, and I'll turn it over, and turn it over, and I'll turn it over, and I'll turn it, and she doesn't know that now the rate has changed, hasn't it? And she comes in, and her yolk's hard now. She's not happy, she likes it running yolk. Yeah? Everyone likes it running yolk. It's not constant. And unless you go back in time and observe it all the time, you can't prove whether or not it was that way. Okay? The best way to see if this method is true is to test a sample of rock where the age is known, and we've observed it, we've watched it cool down, we take it to the lab, and we can observe it like that. Okay? And the problem is no one's a million years old or a billion years old. But the other problem for them is that there are lava flows that happen today, but they wouldn't dare take that to the lab. Why wouldn't they take it to the lab? Because if it comes up with an age that's millions of years old, it means their dating methods are wrong. There's a man called Dr. Steve Austin, not the $1 million man. Okay, he took samples from the lava dome at Mount St. Helens, which erupted on the 17th and cooled down on the 18th of October 1980. In June of 1992, he went up and collected a 7-kilogram block of dacite from high on the lava dome, and he sent it off to the lab. Now, when creationists, young earth creationists, do this work, they have to do it anonymously. Why do they have to do it anonymously? Because they won't date them. If they know that you're a young earther, they will purposely give you bad dates. Okay? Not only that, they had to send it in as a blind sample. They call it a blind sample, which means that they never told him or told them where it was from. Because if you say this is from Mount St. Helens that came, they'll give you a date to do that. And normally they want that sort of information. And normally when people are dating as well, they tell them what we're looking for, the sort of date era that they're looking for, so they'll come up with the data. You know, it seems quite deceiving. So the laboratory was not told that the specimen came from the lava dome at Mount St. Helens and was only 10 years old. The results range from 340,000 years to 2.8 million years. So what are we seeing here? We're seeing that these dating systems can't be trusted. Radiometric dating can't be trusted. I hope that you can kind of get your head around that a little bit and see it's not too hard to grasp. Now the next one, and we hear this all the time, is carbon dating. You've heard of that? Carbon dating, carbon-14. Okay, I've got a little picture here, I don't know if you can see it. You've got sun rays that come from the light, from the sun, and they hit the nitrogen 14, and it turns it into carbon-14. There's carbon in everything. The most common form of carbon is carbon-12. But carbon-14 gets into the plants, and into the grass, and into the fruits, and into the trees. And guess what we do to plants? We eat them. And then it gets inside of us. It gets inside the animals, and guess what we do with the animals? We eat them. And so everything that's biological has carbon-14 inside of it, okay? But when carbon-14 starts to break down, it goes back, it turns back to nitrogen-14, okay? So over time, carbon-14 breaks down into nitrogen-14, and this happens at the rate of 5,730 years per half-life. That means if you have, let's say you take a sample, after 5,370 years, half of the sample will be turned into nitrogen, okay, and that's the way it works. It is estimated that it only survives up to 50,000 years. So this isn't like dating rocks. You don't date rocks, carbon date rocks. you do radiometric on rocks, you do carbon dating on biological matter. So if you find a mummified guy from Egypt, you can carbon date him. If you find a mammoth, you can carbon date that. If you find a tree somewhere in the Antarctic, you can date the tree. Okay, it's biological matter. So the problems with this method is, again, the same problems from before. First of all, the conditions at the time of zero. You don't know whether or not already existing that there was carbon-14 and nitrogen-14 already there. The second is contamination. I heard of one example where they found a frozen seal and they cut it up into parts, sent it off for dating, and they came back with different dates for each part of the seal that they'd found. Okay. Assumption 3 is that it's a constant decay rate, that nothing outside of it has interfered with it, same as the radiocarbon. But again, how's the best way to date carbon? Use carbon dating? You've got to find samples that we know when it died and we send it off for testing. Okay? Samples of carbon-14 have been found in coal. Now, it shouldn't be in coal, right? I've given 10 samples from US coal beds, conventionally dated at 40 to 320 million years old, were found to contain carbon-14 with the equivalent ages of around 48 to 50,000 years. The laboratory did repeat analysis and confirmed that this carbon-14 in the coals was not due to any contamination. Now, it shouldn't be there because it lasts for 50,000 years, supposedly, and it dies out. And coal, in the theory, coal takes millions and millions of years to produce. Does anyone know what coal actually is?
Decaying matter.
It's decaying matter. At some point in history, if you find a coal bed, it was rapidly covered with water and eventually it was compressed. It's compressed biological matter. Do you know what oil is? Squash dinosaurs. It's basically squashed living matter. Oil is squashed living matter. Okay. So they found carbon-14 in coal. They've also found carbon-14 in diamonds. Diamonds, remember, are at the very bottom of the earth. They take how many years, do you think? Millions and millions of years. They're considered some of the oldest and precious stones in the world, okay, out of all the rocks. Diamonds submitted for radiocarbon analysis did contain detectable, significant levels of carbon-14 equivalent to an age of around 55,000 years. Again, the laboratory did repeat analysis and discounted any possibility that this carbon-14 was due to contamination. Now you've got to remember, diamonds are sealed. They're the hardest substance to man. So there's no way of contamination inside of a diamond. You can't scratch a diamond. They just scratch diamonds. With other diamonds. You have to use other diamonds to cut other diamonds. Okay. So we can conclude then really that carbon dating isn't something that we should be relying on because it's so sort of inaccurate. Now another one that people use for dating, or modern day times use for dating, is this one. You remember this in your school textbooks? Yeah? The geological columns. Okay? The geological columns. This was made up by a man called Sir Charles Lyell. Okay? From 1830. He never dug down and found these. He made them up. He made a book, wrote a book, and he made up these 10 columns. They've never been found. They've never found all 10. They just pick one and say, well, that's that one, and this one's this one. They've never found 10 consecutive layers to the earth. But we're taught it in our school, and it's just, we accept it, don't we? Charles Darwin, we all know him, got his book, what was it called, Principles of Geology, I think you can still buy it, brought his book and took it on his little tours, he went around the world, and started to read it, and it was Charles Lyell that basically backed his thinking of this idea that we evolved. Now, Charles Darwin, he only popularised the view. His grandfather believed in it, he taught it, And there were certain other people past in history that believed that there was some form of evolution. But Charles Darwin was the one that popularised the view. And so, do you remember these in your textbooks at school? The tree of life. You know, very simply single-celled creatures at the bottom, and then they start to branch off to, you know, multicellular creatures. Then you get amphibians, birds, and all these different things. This is to do with the theory of evolution, and they match. So when we go back to the previous one, you notice they have animals in each section. So now Charles Lyell's work and Charles Darwin's work is put together, and then if you go back to the very bottom of the earth, you should find very simple creatures, simple cell creatures, and as you move up and further through the layers, you'll find more and more complex creatures. And then they're starting to give dates to them. If you look at the site, see the numbers there? 570 million years ago. You go a little bit further up, look at the Jurassic period, dinosaur time, from 210 all the way to 65. So when you find a dinosaur fossil, remember you can't date fossils. You can't date the rock that a fossil's in because it's sandstone, it's not igneous rock. How do you date a fossil?
Tissue. Organic tissue.
Off the chart.
Off the chart. This is how they would do it. They would say, well, the dinosaurs fit in that. But it's an imaginary chart. They've made it up. The old thing's imaginary. It's never been proven. It's all fake. So you find the dinosaur and it's there. But what happens? This is where the contradictions come in. I mentioned this last week. So you imagine you've got your layers, and you found, let's say, you found yourself a dinosaur, right? Fossil. You can't date the fossil, you can't date this because it's sandstone. So they'll date the rock above it, the igneous rock above it, and by using radioisotope dating. And what happens if it comes back and says 500 million years old? What do they do then? Because where do dinosaurs fit in the scale here? We're talking about 140 to 70 million years old. So what do they do then? You've got to sacrifice one, haven't you? Something's got to go. And obviously evolution can't be the one, so they either have to go with the radiometric dating or they have to go with this system where they're placing all the fossils in those layers. Okay. And so it's circular reasoning. It really is circular reasoning the way that they're doing. Okay. So, where was we? So what are some of the problems with these combined theories? It is known that the layers of the geological column are sometimes found out of place, so you'll find them in the wrong area. They'll find fossils that shouldn't be in that layer, so they'll find complex fossils at the very bottom part. You know, like starfish. Starfish are very complex. They have a nervous system like a telephone exchange system. Very, very complex. Yet they put them at the very lower parts because when they were writing these things, they didn't know what was inside animals like we do today. And so now we know that they have to do some juggling around. So, well, it's going to move up a few levels. But you find fossils in the wrong places. Not only that, you get the layers in the wrong places. Sometimes you get lower, like simple creatures right at the top. Another thing, you also get some fossils found out of order, complex fossils in the lower strata. But you also have something, I like this word, UPS artifacts. You ever heard that term? UPS artifacts. Artifacts that you actually find in the fossil record that shouldn't be there. Okay. So here's some here. So these have all been found in geological columns that shouldn't be, you know, because we're humans. These are all from humans. A hammer, fossilised. A fossilised hat. A fossilised cup there, found in coal. And then that's a cowboy boot with his legs still in it. Okay, and it's fossilised. Okay, so we see that you find artifacts, and you see this all around the world where they are in places where they shouldn't be. Here's another one. This is called polystrata fossils. You know, like the geological column. Do you know if you go through the Grand Canyon and you can see all the lines? And in theory, the canyon, the river at the bottom, cut that canyon out over millions of years, so it was layer upon layer. And so as it's running through, it leaves the lines as a marker. Okay, you're all familiar with that, yeah? Okay. That's a tree, a fossilised tree running through all the strata that's supposedly millions of years old. Okay, these are called polystrata fossils, and they're found all over the world. You look them up, polystrata fossils. Again, showing that this, what it's telling us is that this happened fast. These landmarks that we see around the world didn't take millions of years, they happened rapidly. For a tree to carry its, and like I say, there's places over the world where there's hundreds of them in the rock, in the cliff faces. We also see rock layers that can form in short periods of time. This one here, look how high that is. The bottom part was May 18th, 1980. The top part was June 12th, 1980. And the higher part was March 19th, 1982. That's Mount St Helens. And if you've seen pictures of Mount St Helens, you've been there, that's the bits, Mount St Helens. It's just like a mini Grand Canyon. Everything you find in the Grand Canyon, you find at Mount St Helens, and it happened in days. You actually observed it happen. You can go and watch the video of it erupting, and everything we see, we're going to talk more about this when we get to the flood, we see all the damage that it caused to the landscape. If you can see a little person down the bottom, yeah, it's not a little person, it's a real person, but you can see how little they look to the height of that. And that's happened in less than, what, 6 months, is it 7 months? Okay. So striated layers up to 400 feet thick, formed as a result of landslides, airfall, traffic, whatever that is. I shouldn't have read that, should I? No? Okay. What else? So rock layers can form in short periods of time, so it doesn't take millions. Rapid mountain ranges occurring straight away, mountains. Okay. You see that? What's different about that mountain there? Can anyone see? See, it's squiggly. Okay, what does that mean? It means it was liquid at one point to form. It was mud. That happened fast, because otherwise it would have dried straight away. Okay, because normally mountains are like this, aren't they? The land pushes together and pushes the mountain up. But if you see mountain ranges there, it says how early does that rock? How easily does rock bend? It doesn't. Millions of years of gradual formation cannot explain this, or why it's found all over the planet. Such layers would have to form very fast as soft mud. Only the great flood of Noah's day can be best explained for this. Okay. Fossils can happen in decades. We're told it takes millions and millions of years for fossils to occur. Okay. This is a bundle of fence wire that was thrown into the sea. And they know when the date was. Fascinating fossil fence wire. A roll of modern day fencing wire had become petrified, that's the term for fossilised. Completely encased in solid rock. The wire is ordinary number 8 fencing used between 1920 and 1970. And you see the roll there, and they cracked it open, you can see the wire inside the thing. It's clear that sand shells and shell grit accumulated around the wire, then iron oxide compounds from the rusting wire acted to chemically bind the sandy shell grit into solid rock around the wire. This happened in a few decades, not millions of years. And there's many examples like this where fossils can occur even in months. I've saw examples where they've laid pipes down in Australia, and when they come to use the pipes are fossilised very quickly. And I think the biggest blow, or the most modern blow to modern day dating systems, is the next one, which is this. Dinosaur cells. Actual dinosaur cells found in fossils. I want you to check this guy out. I'll tell you, let me just write some Creation Ministries. Creation Ministries International. Okay. Answers in Genesis. And check this guy as well. His name is Mark. Try and spell his name right. Teach. Right. He's got a YouTube channel. And he's doing a research at the moment on this. Soft dinosaur tissue found in fossils. In fact, this is a Triceratop crown. You know, the Triceratops, they have the big crown. And what he's got there is soft tissue. Actually, you can see that he's got microscopes, and he shows you the videos of its stretchy material. And he actually started dissolving all this mud and everything that was around it. And he's actually got dinosaur cells, split versions on slides of dinosaur cells, dinosaur DNA. You know what that means? We can do.
Make a dinosaur.
We can make a dinosaur. He got sacked, by the way. He got sacked from his job because he wrote a paper about it. He never mentioned the Bible, never mentioned the age of the earth, just mentioned that he found dinosaur cells in fossils and that he got the sack. He took them to court and won, and he used that money to buy some microscopes and start his own lab, and he's doing his own research. Okay. So, you know, we live in a young earth. We do have an eyewitness. We have someone from the very start, and it's God. And God told us that this earth is young. You know, one of the interesting things you could do, if you like maths, is look at the population of the earth today, which is how many? 7 billion people. We talked about this the other night. How many people were at the Second World War? What was the population then? At the time of the Second World War? Anyone have a guess? 2 billion. 2 billion people. That's how fast we grow as humans. And if you do the research, find out the population rates, you can get a figure and work it backwards. And I've done this, and you go backwards in time, and the population of people on this earth goes back 4,000 years. What happened 4,000 years ago? The flood of Noah. The flood of Noah. You know, it's a good little thing to do with your kids. You know, take them back, especially for like maths. Okay. I know it was a little bit scientist-based today, but next week we'll get back to the scriptures. Any questions? Any questions? Okay. Let's close on a word of prayer. Let's Steve, will you close?
Heavenly Father, we're so blessed and grateful and thankful, Lord, that we still have the opportunity to come together as Bible-believing Christians, Lord, into your house, to learn about things that happened in the past and things that are happening now, Lord, which just through your word and through the teaching of your faithful servants, Lord, just puts aside all of man's beliefs and just points everything to you, Lord. And we're just so grateful and thankful, Lord, that you're so faithful and true and honest, and we can rely on you, Lord, through your word, and we just praise you for that. We ask you, Lord, now for your blessings upon each and everybody here. Now keep us healthy and safe, Lord, as we go about our lives and in our personal lives and our work and our Christian lives. And also, Lord, for those who can't be here for whatever reason but are watching through the social media, Lord, we ask for your blessings upon them as well. Finally, Lord, we just pray for this ministry that's starting tomorrow, Lord. It's such an exciting time. We ask, Lord, that you bless this ministry, you bless the people involved in it, either through prayer or actually physically being here and doing it. And we know, Lord, that we can expect great things from you, Lord, and it's all for you and your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.